Xenophon, writing decades after the fact, records an account passed down from men who marched with Alexander into Persia. At Gaugamela, the night before the largest battle of his life, with Darius commanding an army 5 times the size of his own, Alexander's officers found him asleep, not pacing, not praying. Asleep past the hour the camp had assembled for final orders. His general Parmenion had to waken himself. When asked how he could sleep before the battle that would decide everything, Alexander reportedly said the battle was already won. Darius had done the work of assembling a target, and there was nothing left to fear, because there was nothing left undecided in his own mind. That single detail, a young commander sleeping through the most dangerous morning of his life, tells you everything about how dominant men have operated across 3,000 years of recorded history. He wasn't calm because he was fearless. He was calm because the outcome had already been settled inside his own head, long before it was settled on the field. Everyone else in that war camp was still negotiating with Un-70. He'd already finished negotiating with it days earlier, and what was left was just execution. Men who reorganize reality around them are not running on talent, and they're not running on luck. They're running on a different operating system than the men competing against them. The first piece of that system has nothing to do with confidence. It's about where rules come from. Every commander before Alexander treated the size of an army as the deciding fact of a battle. More men, more chariots, more cavalry. That was the law. Nobody questioned. Darius had built his entire strategy around that law. He outnumbered Alexander by a margin no general should have been able to overcome, and he was right to expect that margin to matter. Alexander didn't accept the premise. He studied the ground at Gaugamela 4 days before the battle, found a stretch of terrain Darius had leveled for his scythed chariots, and built his entire plan around dragging the fight away from open ground and onto a diagonal line that broke Darius's formation apart before it ever reached him. He didn't outman Darius. He refused to fight the battle Darius had designed. This is the first structural habit of every man who has ever bent history around himself. He audits the terms of the fight itself, instead of accepting the terms his opponent has already set. Most men lose before the first blow lands because they agreed to compete inside a framework somebody else built, using somebody else's definition of advantage. But raw self-belief, without a system behind it, gets men killed. History is full of commanders who were certain, loud, and fearless, and who collapsed the moment reality pushed back because their certainty had no scaffolding under it. The men who actually lasted paired that instinct with something far less glamorous. They built structures so clean that nobody could find a seam to lever open. That's the part almost nobody talks about. Take Genghis Khan. Before him, Stev armies ran on clan loyalty. You fought for your Khan because you were born into his bloodline, his tribe, his obligations. That system had one permanent weakness. Bloodline loyalty is sentimental, and sentiment can be bought, insulted, or inherited badly by a weak son. Every steppe empire before the Mongols eventually cracked along exactly that seam. Genghis Khan didn't try to be more inspiring than the men who'd failed before him. He rebuilt the foundation. He created a personal guard, the Keshik, recruited from the sons of defeated rivals and from Pommern soldiers who'd proven themselves in battle not from his own bloodline. Promotion ran on merit and performance, not birth order. He organized his entire army into units of 10, scaling up to 100, 1,000, 10,000, with each layer responsible for the discipline of the layer below it. If one unit failed, it didn't take the whole structure down with it. The system didn't depend on anyone's personal devotion to him. It depended on the architecture itself, rewarding loyalty and punishing betrayal automatically, with or without his presence in the room. That's the second habit. Loyalty gets engineered into the structure, not requested from people's hearts. A system that depends on people loving you is a system one bad year away from collapse. A system where betrayal is structurally unprofitable doesn't need anyone's affection at all. Now move to Rome. 49 BC, Julius Caesar stands at the edge of a small river called the Rubicon, with one legion behind him. Roman law is explicit. No general brings an army across that river into Italy. Doing it is treason, automatically, with no negotiation. Caesar knows that the moment he crosses, there is no path back to being a private citizen, only civil war or death. He crosses anyway, and the historian who recorded it says he spoke 4 words: "The die is cast." Here's what that moment actually did, structurally. Up until the riverbank, Caesar had options. Options feel like safety, but options are also exactly where hesitation lives. And hesitation is the one weakness an enemy can always read on your face, in your timing, in the half-second delay before you commit. The instant he crossed, every option disappeared, and so did every trace of internal conflict. His officers didn't have to wonder if he might turn back. His enemies couldn't bait him into negotiating from weakness, because there was no weak position left to negotiate from. Removing his own exit removed the one vulnerability that actually mattered. Third habit, had the real threshold moment. You remove your own optionality on purpose, not recklessly, strategically. Burned bridges don't just commit you. They remove the seam an opponent could otherwise pry open. One more, because the pattern shows up at the level of entire civilizations, not just individual moves. Cyrus the Great built the Persian Empire on a rule every conqueror before him treated as obvious. Defeat a people, and you punish them, enslave them, erase their customs so they can't organize against you. Cyrus broke that rule on purpose. When he took Babylon, he let captives go home, allowed conquered peoples to keep their own laws, religions, and local governors. It looked like mercy. It was levirate. Every region he didn't crush became a region with no incentive to revolt, no resentment compounding underground, no permanent occupation force required to hold it. He didn't need fewer enemies because he was kinder. He needed fewer enemies because rebellion is expensive. Had he just made loyalty cheaper than rebellion. That's a rule rewritten at the level of an entire governing system. And it's why the empire he built outlasted him by 2 centuries. Put all 4 of these next to each other, and the pattern stops looking like 4 separate stories. Alexander rewrote the terms of the fight before it began. Genghis Khan rewrote where loyalty comes from. Caesar rewrote what commitment costs. Cyrus rewrote what conquest requires. None of them won because they were unbeatable in a single fight. They won because they kept eliminating the seams where a fight could even start. This is the actual mechanism behind the idea of an apex predator in human history. It was never about aggression, and it was never about dominance for its own sake. Most defeats in history don't come from a stronger enemy. They come from internal seams, a council that hesitates, a loyalty that was only ever sentimental, an option left open that becomes a door for someone else to walk through, terms accepted out of habit instead of inspected for who actually set them. Apex-level operators across history spent more energy removing their own seams than they spent attacking anyone else's. Find the terms in your own situation that you've accepted purely because they were handed to you, and ask whether you actually have to fight on that ground at all. Look at what other loyalty your plans depend on, and ask if it survives a bad week. Because if it only survives on goodwill, It isn't a system, it's a hope. Find the threshold decision in front of you that you keep leaving half-committed, with an exit still propped open, and notice that the exit itself is the reason you can't move with any force. And look for the place where generosity costs you less than being feared, because every empire that lasted built that trade in deliberately, while every empire that burned out skipped it. Alexander slept the night before Gaugamela, because the battle had already been decided in his own mind, on his own terms, before Darius ever moved a single chariot. The men who reorganize reality around them aren't smarter than everyone else in the room. They're just the only ones who checked whether the terms of the fight were ever real to begin with, and then built something underneath, themselves so solid that nobody could ever find the seam.